Palantir stock. Palantir is the subject of today's video. So I saw this article was written just a few days ago here. I thought I would go ahead and read through this with you guys here today on the Reaction channel and kind of give my opinions and perspectives about the points this gentleman brings up in this video. Palantir AI is eating the world. So yeah, I love to read through different people's opinions, perspectives on stocks, whether they're bearish, bullish. Sometimes we react to those on the channel. And by the way, I did a sponsorship with Seeking Alpha like 1 or 2 months ago. And the link they gave me back when I did that sponsorship with them still works for a free trial. So if you want to read through more articles that this gentleman writes or more Palantir articles or other stocks and things like that, I'll leave that as a pinned comment today, just in case any of you guys want to, get the free trial and whatever after this video is over here today. So yeah, let's just get straight into this, guys. Appreciate y'all joining me. New all-time high subscribers in the history channel. Oh, and by the way, I understand like the last month has sucked for Palantir shareholders, and I know there's a lot of people trolling Palantir and things like that. But let's just back up a little bit. Let's not forget year to date, the stock is up 127%. So has the last month sucked in regards to Palantir? The last few weeks, sure. But the stock is still been pretty darn tremendous this year, and anybody that was buying the dip all last year and certainly at the beginning of this year, you've done pretty dang well with this one so far. Okay, it's a long journey in regards to stocks like this. Okay, so to understand Palantir, it's worth tracing the evolutionary chain of precursor technologies that today underpin its attractive platform. I will perform the exercise briefly in the introduction, after which I will provide the quantitative analysis of the business, including a brief assessment of the primary moats. In short, with $3.1 billion in cash, no long-term debt, very strong embedding moat, and decades of growth ahead, I believe Palantir at $30 billion enterprise value is attractive. Is it the most attractive it's been last year? No. And for those buying today, you will invariably need to exercise patience in the years ahead. That said, I do like it here, and for those with a long-term horizon, right? And, this is kind of like the frustrating part of stocks is many times folks get very caught up into whatever's like, okay, the stock's up 127% year to date, right? And so a lot of people think, oh, the stock's expensive now. It's overpriced. It's overvalued or something like that. It's not how stocks work. A great example is NVIDIA, right? NVIDIA was $110 back in Q4 2022. NVIDIA makes its first double up. It goes to $220. People are saying this is crazy. NVIDIA is a bubble. This is wild, right? Today, NVIDIA stock trades at $400+ and it's actually relatively cheap. If you look at what the growth rates are NVIDIA has versus what the forward P is, the forward P NVIDIA right now is in the 30s, and they have triple-digit revenue growth, and they're growing their bottom line by nearly 10x. So the whole premise of it's gone up so much means it's overvalued doesn't work. The same exact way where if a stock goes down a ton doesn't mean magically it's the greatest deal ever in the creation of mankind, right? If a firm stock fell 70%, just because it fell 70% doesn't mean it's a great deal then at that point, right? Just because Robinhood or whatever stocks, were popular, fell, Coinbase or whatever. If they fall 60, 70, 80%, doesn't mean they're cheap. You got to look at what are the net incomes this company's bringing in, what can they bring in the future, likely over the next 3 to 5 years, and then try to work backwards with your valuation and say, does this make sense? So I think that's an important factor we all have to account for, especially in regards to a stock like Palantir that's gone up a lot. You could also look at Palantir. Palantir a few years ago, 2-3 years ago, Palantir was a $30, $40 stock, right? So you say, oh my gosh, Palantir is $14. It's the cheapest stock in creation of mankind. It doesn't work like that. You got to really look at what the net incomes can be in the future, okay? Note, in order to understand Palantir, PLTR, and its platform, I believe the following introductory ideas are worthwhile. Yes, they are very much qualitative oriented. I will provide deep quantitative consideration following this introduction. Over the last 3 to 5 years or so, I've almost certainly focused on the idea that Earth and its citizens are curiously fashioning themselves in the superintelligent AI of sorts. There's a global superintelligence that has been building via the internet, something akin to the synapses in the brain, data centers, something akin to gray matter, and the neurons within the system, the humans in the digital world. That is, humans and our technology have conspired to build a global superintelligence based on a set of precursor technologies that I will define just below. The evolutionary chain has looked something like this. 1. Printing press invented. 2. Information loaded into books stored in libraries, arguably precursor data centers. That's an interesting. This is why I really want to read through this article with you guys. It's very different kind of mind place we're going here. And the more you read through it, you're like, dang, this kind of all makes sense. Computing and on-premises data centers invented. Data now stored in disconnected, separate on-premises data centers globally. 4. Internet invented. Data begins to be aggregated into a central location, i.e. the internet and data volume explode higher. 5. Cloud computing and storage invented. All of this aggregated data can now be used for the creation of AI machine learning superintelligences like ChatGPT. 6, and this is where we're at now, a global network of artificial intelligence form. It is worthwhile to trace the technological precursors that have led to the creation of a fairly mind-blowing technology that is LLMs, such as ChatGPT. Without the centralization of data via the internet, and without the computing power and cheap storage of cloud computing, there could be no AIs that act as superintelligences. Without the internet, without cloud computing, there could be no ChatGPT, 100%. In this sense, it's an evolutionary chain that has led to this point in human history. And I believe tracing the evolutionary chain is worth our while. 100%. I love that. The way you put all that, laid that out there, 100%. 100%. I believe the next logical evolutionary stage is for humans to build virtual realities and architect these superintelligences into VR. Creating karmic systems, creating God in some sense, who governs our virtual reality subtly and in the most appreciable manner. Man, this guy writes. This guy writes. I would love to see you guys read this out loud in a video. Holy smokes, man. My gosh. I believe the next logical evolutionary chain will be the computational reality. For instance, in the same way we perform computational fluid dynamics for building rockets or planes, whereby we simulate outcomes based on the decisions before we actually act. We'll be able to simulate entire ecosystems using software. Wow, that's a pretty interesting thought process. We'll be able to simulate entire ecosystems using software. That's nuts. Yeah. And this is our nature of Palantir. Palantir's ontology creates a computational replica of a business or a battlefield and allows users to execute AI-driven simulations whereby companies simulate outcomes based upon a spectrum of key variables, which are so numerous as they can only be computable by a machine before actually making those decisions, right? And, it's almost like the butterfly effect, or like, I don't know if you guys have ever thought in your lives, like, what if I made this decision or that decision, right? Or what if I did this instead of this, right? And, we'll never know those answers. Well, at least not right now, right? Maybe we would in the future. But for a company to be able to basically create their whole system and say, okay, what if we made this decision? Or what if the AI makes this decision? How's it going to affect all these other numerous things over here? And does that give us good results? Does it give us likely bad results? Or does it give us something in between, right? And this is where AI comes in hand, because we just can't feasibly run all those, calculations. I mean, you could, but it would be literally pretty much impossible to do, or take your whole life to just figure out how one decision could affect things, versus an AI platform could figure all this out in a matter of seconds, minutes, right? Maybe a little longer than that if it's super complicated, but it can figure out these things, and it can say, this is our best solution. We should make this decision. Oh, we're about to have a problem here likely in our business, so we need to do this now so we don't have that issue. That's magical, right? Because up to this point, you need to have a fortune seer basically be able to do that, right? Somebody that is just as phenomenal as seeing the future before everybody else sees the future. But the problem is, for most businesses, they're they don't have a Steve Jobs there, right? Or an Elon Musk or somebody that's that special. They can really see the future like that and be able to like, this is where we're going and this is how we're going to execute to go there. And so to be able to have a machine be able to do that for you is pretty darn magical, right? Because remember, most people that run a business are not super genius business people. That's something we got to remember, right? Even for a lot of big companies. Like they're good at what they do, but it does not mean they're a super genius, right? So this is just some food for thought in regards to this whole situation, right? Just like most people that play quarterback in the NFL are not Tom Brady or not Aaron Rodgers, right? There's a bunch of these guys that play quarterback and they make it to that high level, but they're so inferior to like the top tier guys. The same thing happens in business. So what if you have something that helps level the playing field? Well, then that thing becomes the most valuable thing in the world. You see where we're going here? If you have something that this thing over here makes your business like you've got a Steve Jobs running it, oh my gosh, what if it's better than that, right? So that's where the magic comes in kind of Palantir and kind of what they're up to, in my opinion, right? LLMs interestingly, are in some way in the final piece of the puzzle of Palantir, and it appears management understands it quite well. In the past, creating a one-to-one data replica, i.e. ontology, in a computing environment was unnecessary and costly. With the advent of superintelligences, i.e. LLMs, and future forms, a computable replica of a business battlefield and supply chain is indispensable. After reading all this, I'm going to have a freaking master's degree. The LLMs would mostly be rendered useless without this complete, comprehensive data mapping that Palantir provides. To add more clarity to my thinking here, I would invite you to think about a rainforest. In some sense, it's a computational environment with Fibonacci sequences dictating the platform of plant growth and physics dictating the cycles of precipitation. It's computable. That's interesting. It can be replicated. Okay. There is an underlying superintelligence, which most would call God, to a rainforest dictating its execution of the system. In some senses, the cycles and patterns of a rainforest are just an .exe application in a computing environment. Okay. In some sense, the Carmelian that changes its colors depending upon the color of the background is executing a .exe that signals its colors should change within the computing environment that is reality. The same could be said about companies and their labor capital or militaries and their soldiers. And Palantir provides a platform to interact with computable nature of companies' fabric. 100%. Since I originally purchased Palantir at about $10 a share, my central bull thesis has revolved around the business of embedding moat. That is, Palantir software is a mission-critical software for most important institutions on Earth. At the dawn of the agricultural revolution, governments formed to provide a protection service to humans that had accrued livestock and crops. The principal function of early governments was to protect these citizens from still living nomadic lifestyles, from pillaging their property. Property owners paid governments to be vendors of the defense services. Still to this day, the very essence of governments is to provide defense services to its citizens in exchange for tax dollars. Yeah, that could be said. In this vein, Palantir has become a mission-critical software platform. That's why some people could say, it's almost like the mafia, right? Almost like the mafia a little bit, You give them a little bit and they protect you. Palantir has become a mission-critical software platform to the West, which creates robust embedding moats for the business, and it's embedded into the likes of the CIA, FBI, Royal Navy, and other vital vendors in protective services. In Q2, we secured a multi-year contract award from the U.S. Special Operations Command worth up to $463 million, new contract awards from the Air Space Forces of $110 million, in the conversion of Army Research Lab R&D funding will longer-term work. So, obviously talking about some of the recent contract wins there. On the international government side, our UK government business was particularly strong in Q2. Yes, 100%. I think it could be argued that a few other companies on Earth have durable 80% gross margins as Palantir possesses, due to the role of vendor of protection services in the form of data analytics and compute ontologies for Western governments. True. But on the flip side, to push back against that, it's great if you have 80% plus gross margins, but at the end of the day, it's really about that bottom line, right? And what are you, really making truly as a business on your bottom line, right? And so gross margin super important, but net margin's also super important, right? And we're just finally flipped this baby to profitability, so we got a long way to go there. But when you have 80% plus gross margins, I can tell you it makes your life a lot easier as a company. While the nature of Palantir is certainly compelling, the reality is the business must execute and it must financially make sense for us investors to accumulate shares in accordance with the immutable laws of money, such as time value of money. We must still buy Palantir in such a way that it quantitatively makes sense. To this end, let's review some of the financial data to determine if it's attractive at $15 a share, which is where it roughly trades today, which represents about a $30 billion enterprise value. Below, we can see Palantir grew at about 20% U.S. commercial. At the same time, we're seeing success across many industries. In Q2, we closed deals in U.S. commercial in roughly 30 different industries, including across pharmaceuticals, energy, consumer staples, utilities, healthcare, construction, automotive, transportation infrastructure. We used so many big words earlier in this article. Now I'm unconfident in just reading in life. The list goes on and spans industries and institutions at the core of today's society. As I explored in the recent reviews of Palantir's earnings, true underlying growth has actually been higher than what has been reported due to the impacts of Palantir's experimental SPACs companies. True, collapsing. Yeah, that did hurt bad. That's pretty much in the past now, but that hurt us for a bit there. Palantir invested in venture capital style companies in exchange for contracts, and most of those VC style companies are now struggling immensely. As is common in the VC world and for the majority of business, i.e. the principals, U.S. commercial revenue grew 20%, declined 4% sequentially to $103 million. Now remember, definitely a very tough quarter to do deals. And this is something I heard from Snowflake as well. I don't know if you guys got to listen to Snowflake conference call from a few days ago. Snowflake specifically cited on their conference call that, companies have just been watching their budgets like insane. And it seems like from what Snowflake said, they've seen stabilization here recently, which is a very positive trend. So, in the way Frank Slootman kind of described some of the stuff and the other executives on the Snowflake call is basically companies were just going out of their way to insane levels to just do everything possible to watch cost, watch spend, even things that might not have been their best interest, to sign shorter deals, to put off deals, and all those sorts of things. And so that's the sort of environment you're in, it's going to affect the Palantir, right? So the fact that we've seen some stabilization should help Palantir's numbers certainly over the next few quarters here in regards to companies maybe loosening up budgets just a little bit, not even to a big extent, just a little bit. To this end, I was very happy with Palantir's U.S. commercial revenue growth. As the data below illustrates, the median software growth rate in the U.S. is presently 22% and will likely find its way below 20% in Q2 2023. So 37% growth is fantastic in my mind, he says, okay? Yeah, certainly I hope to see Palantir growing a lot faster in the future, but in this sort of tough environment, it's what we're dealing with, right? And with all the interaction that Palantir has going on, that should add up to a lot of deals down the road, whether it be in this upcoming quarter, the following quarter. And, something interesting that happened on the Snowflake conference call, to go back to that one, because that was just a few days ago, right? They asked the executives of Snowflake very specifically, NVIDIA is making all this money right now, but when do the software companies start to make money? And what the Snowflake executives said, they said 2024. That's when you start to see that software hit. Right now, it's all about the hardware, getting all the infrastructure up and rolling. That's why you see NVIDIA making so much money and will continue to make a lot of money over the next several quarters. But in terms of when you're going to start really seeing all this positively affect companies like a Palantir or anybody else playing in this market, 2024, okay? So if you got your hopes up thinking, it's going to be this year, it's just not realistic. The hardware is not even really set up the way it needs to be set up. And if the hardware is not really set up the way it needs to be set up yet, you can't get the software really rolling and generating you substantial revenues and those sorts of things yet. Okay. The U.S. commercial revenue growth was underpinned by an exceptional customer count growth. Yeah, 38%, very nice. And I'm really excited to see over this next few quarters because all the interactions they have going on right now. Similarly, Palantir's overall commercial revenue grew at very healthy rates when excluding the impacts of the collapsing SPAC companies and their associated revenue. Now, moving to our commercial segment, second quarter, and this is a company talking, second quarter commercial revenue grew 10% year over year and declined 2% sequentially to $232 million. A challenging sequential compare as anticipated due to a $14 million decline in revenue from strategic commercial contracts. Excluding the impacts from strategic commercial contracts, commercial revenue growth grew 19% year over year and 5% sequentially. Okay, so once again, that whole SPAC situation really hurt the company over the past couple of years. It looks like moving forward, that should be eliminated, especially in 2024 and beyond. It should be literally no factor at all. Okay, commercial revenue growth, 10% there. I believe the answer to this question on why Palantir is not more profitable is Palantir's aggressively reinvesting into commercial business that's really only about 5 years old in the current form, 100%. You know, that's something that gets forgotten. Like Palantir's commercial business is still kind of a baby, infant, newborn business at this point in time. In this vein, this young, rapidly growing business, operating $900 million annualized run rate as of today, growing 20% in this demand environment, context for which I provided for the recent Amazon review is pretty dang good. While we continue to increase our breadth and expansion across industries, we continue to grow our existing customers. We had over 24 U.S. commercial customers that brought in more than $1 million in revenue each during the quarter alone. And we're seeing outsized growth for our newest customers. 54% of U.S. commercial revenue, excluding strategic commercial contracts, is from customers that have started since the beginning of 2021, with nearly all year-over-year growth coming from those same customers. We expect this trend to continue, says the CRO there. Eventually, Chief Revenue Officer, we will emerge from the SPAC revenue drag as well as a tepid software demand environment. And it's likely or entirely conceivable that Palantir's entire commercial business grows at 25% once again. In fact, I think there's a straight line to the entire conglomerate growing 20 to 30% sustainably once again as we emerge from this more challenging environment. I agree with that. And that would be a huge moment, you know, especially if we could talk about 30% again, right? Because that was the old number, like the 30% revenue growth. That's what got everybody so excited in the past. Like if we could ever get back there, oh my gosh, it's lights out from that point on, especially when you're growing 30% on a now profitable company. That's the game changer, because before, when they were growing at, you know, very high growth rates, they were losing a fortune back then. If you could talk about getting back to close to those growth rates as a profitable business, the money that starts to be thrown off to that bottom line and the free cash flow as well, ooh, baby, does it start getting fun. That's when we become a cash cow business and the whole script on Palantir changes. And at that point, we'll own a business with immense embedding network effects and brand moats, which has 80% gross margins and $3.1 billion in cash and no debt. And yeah, probably able to be a bigger number by that time. Well, buybacks could maybe affect things a little bit. Turning to our global top-line results, we generated $533 million in revenue, up 13% year over year, 2% sequentially, said the CFO. Just kind of recapping some of the numbers there. As we read, Palantir's government business is not growing exceptionally rapidly at present. By the way, I'm going to pick on this man because I don't know. Are you supposed to use an ly back with another ly? Exceptionally rapidly? I don't know. I'm going to have to talk to one of my old grammar professors back from GCC, my community college there, and say, can you use an ly with another ly backed by it? At present, especially relative to the growth rates it experienced over the last decade. Over the last decade or so, the government business has compounded at 35% annualized, and the company has asserted that similar growth would likely sustain in the decade ahead. Considering the nascence of AI software and the slow pace at which government contracts evolve, I believe Palantir when it says it could grow 35% annualized for the next 10 years, though I would not believe them if they told me that would happen linearly Yeah, and it's kind of a straight line, like it's consistent, right? Yeah, because certainly with government contracts, it's lumpy, man. One moment it can look like the government business is horrible. Next minute it's like, oh my gosh, it's on fire. You've got to just kind of base, and it even goes back to the way I run my projections and numbers in regards to companies. I always run numbers on like, what do I think the average growth rate is going to be over the next 5 years for net income growth, for top line growth, if it's for gross margin, what's the average growth rate? Because if you're trying to predict the exact number on a year in, year out basis, unless it's some business like a Coca-Cola or Pepsi or something like that that's, grows 2 to 5% a year, might be a different situation. But for companies that are growing double-digit percentages, man, it's impossible. So you have to kind of extrapolate it and say, what's the average growth rate I expect for this company over the future years? And then you can run your numbers and kind of go from there. But yeah, to try to figure out on a year-by-year basis or think it's going to grow exactly at this number every single year, it's not realistic. You have recessions that happen. You have situations where companies are going to pull back huge on spending. You have other environments that are very expansion-like for the economy, for businesses, and they're going to want to, sign the biggest contracts, right? You're going to have inflationary environments. You're going to have deflationary environments. That can all change everything immensely. Business does not happen linearly. And the best time to buy a high-quality business with highly defensible moats, which create highly defensible future cash flows, is during periods of which non-linearity occurs and is priced in the company's shares, as was the case in Palantir throughout 2022. Yeah, that's a great point. Palantir was messy in 2022, and I was buying in 2022, and, you had to buy on a lot of belief at that time. You had to really already be down the rabbit hole because at that time, let's just call it what it was. Palantir was losing a fortune in 2022. The losses on the bottom line were ugly. And on top of that, you had the huge deceleration of growth rates and the whole come down of oh, we were growing 30%, now we're not anymore. And they took that away. Plus you had the huge losses. It was, 2022 was a scary time to be a Palantir investor or somebody buying the stock. 2023 now at this point in time, it's much less scary. It's just more like, is $10 fair for Palantir right now? 15, 20, 25, 30? That's the only question, right? Concluding thoughts. The AI arms race and valuation. In 2021, I would often state that we are in an AI arms race, suggesting that companies needed to begin focusing on updating their systems such as AI govern vast portions of those systems. Least these lose market share to companies who were savvy enough to retrofit their businesses with AI systems. Well, there's not much focus on the idea during that time. In 2023, the world has come to realize AI implementation must be top imperative for business leaders in the 2020s, 100%. It kind of goes through what Carp and folks have said, things we've already talked about on the channel. To close, as with all our companies, Palantir sits atop a truly giant cash hoard alongside $0 in debt, which poises a company to grow and evolve sustainably and rapidly in the decade ahead. From a valuation perspective, while the business is not nearly as attractive as it was in the single digits, I do believe it remains attractive at about a $30 billion enterprise value for long-term investors. So, I really loved this article from the perspective of running us through kind of AI, where we're going here, where we've been in the past. I think it was phenomenal. I think where this maybe missed a little bit is kind of dive into, well, what can future cash flow numbers be? What can future net income numbers be? Look at the market cap today. Where are we going when it comes to that? I think maybe we missed a little bit of that, but I think this gentleman did a phenomenal job of really just running us through kind of just a different thought process. I think that's where his real strength is this evolutionary chain, and I think that's just a phenomenal job by him there. So overall, I definitely enjoyed reading that article. Once again, if you guys want to check out any articles from that gentleman or other articles, check out the pinned comment down there. That's for a free trial of Seeking Alpha. But yeah, that was good stuff. I'd love to know your guys' kind of opinion here in regards to all this and those sorts of things. So I appreciate everybody joining me. As always, thanks so much for being here, folks. Thanks for being subscribed, new all-time high subscribers in the History Channel. I appreciate each and every one of you for being here, as always. If you're looking to apply to join my private group and get access to our Discord chat with myself, we have a ton of Palantir investors in there. It's ridiculous. We're always sharing everything, new videos, articles, ways of thinking about Palantir, valuation models, stuff like that. If you ever want to join us in there, check out the description area. You can fill out an application and we can see if you're a good fit to join us in there. Much love as always, and have a great day.